Welcome back to Architecture Hunter webinars. After an incredible first day focused on urban legacy, we are thrilled to continue this journey of knowledge and exchange. Yesterday, we had thought-provoking presentations from Luis Sacristã of Hederick Studio and Adam Cordal of Spall Architects, who brought valuable insights on the role of architects in shaping lasting urban environments. If you missed, don't worry, these sessions were recorded and will be available on our website in the coming days. And for those joining us for the first time, welcome. Architecture Hunter is a global platform dedicated to discovering and sharing the most innovative ideas in architecture. We've always been driven by three core pillars: inspiring, informing, and entertaining. And now, in this new initiative, we introduce a fourth: education. Our webinars mark the beginning of a larger effort to provide continuous, sorry. So sorry, guys, I forgot to share my screen with you. But our webinars mark the beginning of our larger effort to provide continuous learning opportunities for architecture professionals and enthusiasts worldwide. And what makes us unique, besides our super fresh curation, visually appealing and didactic content on Instagram, our video-driven storytelling allows us to communicate architectural ideas in an engaging and compelling way. This format has helped us connect with a global audience, making complex topics more accessible and inspiring meaningful discussions. This series of webinars is just the beginning. We will host monthly talks featuring leading voices in architecture and design. Stay tuned to our website and social media for updates on upcoming sessions and speakers. And this week has been and will be an exciting journey filled with insightful discussion led by top experts in architecture and urbanism. Each day, we explore key themes that are shaping the future of the built environment, bringing together thought leaders to share their knowledge and experiences. Today, we are proud to bring Sustainability Day, a program co-created by Architecture Hunter and the Holcim Foundation, and presented by the Holcim Foundation. The Holcim Foundation has played a fundamental role in making this webinar series possible, not only for hosting today's discussions, but also supporting the broader mission of promoting sustainability and architectural excellence. We are incredibly grateful for their partnership in driving these crucial conversations forward. Their 2025 awards, offering a total prize of $1 million, are closing soon. So if you're working on an innovative, sustainable design project, don't miss this incredible opportunity. Submit your entry by February 11th. So go to awards.holcimfoundation.org. Today's format will be a little bit different. Instead of individual presentations, we will have panel discussions featuring leading voices in sustainable architecture. We'll have two panels, the first with the jury members of the Holcim Foundation Awards, and the second with a past award winner, offering valuable insights into sustainability and innovation. And at the end of each panel, we will open the floor for audience questions, so be sure to send yours in the chat or Q&A session through the discussion. So let's meet today's speakers for the first panel. Kicking off our first panel, we will have the pleasure of introducing our moderator, Daniela Silva, an architect and journalist from the Architecture Hunter team, currently based in Portugal. So if you have already read the articles on our platform, you have already come across her insightful writing. And joining Daniela in this discussion, we are honored to welcome Kjetil Thorsen, co-founder of Snøhetta, and our very own Gustavo Utrabo, a distinguished Brazilian architect. Together, they will share their perspectives as jury members of the Holcim Foundation Awards, diving deep into the role of sustainability in shaping the future of architecture. Well, Kjetil Thorsen is the co-founder of Snøhetta, as I have already mentioned, and a key figure in shaping its global transdisciplinary approach to architecture. His portfolio includes landmark projects such as the Biblioteca Alexandrina, the Norwegian National Opera and Ballet, and the Shanghai Opera, among others. A recipient of major awards like the Mies van der Rohe Award and the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, he is also a frequent lecturer and jury member for prestigious competitions. In 2025, he'll serve as the chairman of the Holcim Foundation Awards. Gustavo Utrabo is a Brazilian architect and visual artist leading Estúdio Gustavo Utrabo in São Paulo. His work explores contemporary contradictions through technique and sensitivity, shaping new landscapes. He has received international recognition, including the RIBA International Prize and the RIBA Emerging Architect Award 2018. His projects have been finalists for the Miss Crown Hall America's Prize and Harvard's Wilbright Prize. Notably, his work is featured in prestigious collections, including the Centre Pompidou in Paris. So please welcome Daniela, Kjetil, and Utrabo.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Amanda. And also thank you to the Holcim Foundation and, of course, both of our guests today. It's a pleasure to be here with both of you. And to start the conversation, I would like to start asking Gustavo. Now, sustainability is a guiding principle in your work. And your projects like the Children Village and the Plus La Pena housing project, they both showcase a strong commitment to passive design strategies and material choices. Now, my question is, how has your approach to sustainability evolved over the years, particularly in response to Brazil's context?
So, hi everyone. Thank you, Amanda, for the presentation. Thank you, Daniela and Kjetil. It's a huge pleasure to be in this panel with you. I have been admiring your work for so long and visiting your work, so it's amazing. I'm thrilled to be here. And Daniela, thank you for your question. And I think over the years, we as a student, we have the opportunity to work in different regions of Brazil, right? So Brazil is this vast country with different understandings of culture and nature, right? So what we understand by nature and culture is intrinsically related to our cosmology, right? So for example, if we take a look into a tribe, Yanomami tribe in the Amazon rainforest, and me here in São Paulo, our understanding of culture and nature is so different, right? And they are so kind of well, they start from a different perspective, right? So, and I think in terms of Brazil, this diversity is something that is extraordinary, right? And such a diverse country, I think would be kind of almost dystopian or utopian to think in a single approach of sustainability, right? Because we can kind of, it's so different, the context, the climate, the people, so on and so forth. So, and I think it's interesting that these two projects that you brought to discussion, because both of them we use brick, right? And I think, and this kind of only one simple element, right? But the approach of using this element, these two different projects are so different, right? So for example, in La Pena project, we use brick, we aim to produce brick with the material from a landfill, right? So in other words, is taking what was rejected by the city of São Paulo and transform it into architectural elements, right? But here the important thing is not just reusing the material in a context where the housing are self-made housing, right? So of reusing the material and produce the brick, for me, what was super interesting was the knowledge of using the material and producing the brick, right? Because if you bring the community to that discussion, they start to learn how to build and produce the bricks and build with the bricks so they can build their own houses, right? So for me, in this case, like the idea of the brick is kind of, it's important for sure, but the most valuable thing is the knowledge. How can we exchange knowledge? And for me, this kind of, it's a super sustainable way of approach in this way. In the other hand, for example, the children village, which is in the middle, it's kind of 1,000 kilometers from São Paulo. It's a super warm place. There we use the brick too, but and we produce the brick locally. But it was more to kind of reduce the carbon footprint, right? And how can we bring things together, but to cool down the building, right? So I think in the same sense, it's kind of the one element, one architectural element, but two radical different approaches. And I do think this could be, it's our way of trying to do things.
Okay, so you would say that it's not only about looking at the result, but the process, how we get there.
Well,
in that case, with the brick.
Yeah, I don't think like the final result is it's something that it's a result of a process, right? And I think like learning through the process and it's something that in so many different projects is so different to actually do that, because you need to prototype and you need to do so many different things. And so I always tend to don't take too much care in the final image, but it should be beautiful and should be everything that we aim to. This is a result, right?
Yeah, but it's more about the process. Thank you so much. I would like now to switch to Kjetil. Now, Snøhetta, it's known for its deep connection between architecture and nature. And from the Oslo Opera House integration into the fjord, or to the under restaurant's role in marine conservation, your projects usually go beyond efficiency and actively contribute to the ecological regeneration, right? So my question is, how do you ensure that this approach remains at the core of your designs?
First of all, Gustavo, thank you so much for your beginning. And I have to say, I do admire what you're doing. There is this beautiful lightness, and Daniela, for your questions. And I think it's great to be in this little board here talking about things that are really close to my heart, I have to say. And it somehow brings forward the different opinions that we actually do need to bring forward. So the questions are in many ways spot on, and they're very much aligned with, as we will see, the Holcim Foundation's also long-term goals. But back to your question, I mean, it's not easy, right? We know it's hard. And everyone has to know that in order to maintain long-term strategies for how to really deep dive into ecological concerns, needs a very deep and sort of community feeling in the office that this is the way you're going. You know, it doesn't help you much if you have 10 people moving in a completely different direction. So you really have to be alert from day one. And normally that's communicated to the staff by the principles that we're guided by. And our principles came back from the first UN report, Our Common Future, which was by our Prime Minister in 1987, where the UN goals of sustainability were defined for the first time within environment, social and economic sustainability. And for us, that became a sort of growing platform for how to maintain the same engagement over many, many, many years. So you can go back, you can judge, you can look, what have we done? What were the results? How do we measure them? And how do we use that when we try to convince new clients to move in this direction? So by doing post-occupancy studies, by measuring certain elements of things that you can actually see, measuring growth, measuring ecological growth on for instance, under the Opera House, looking at small things that probably in the future could be multiplied into much larger community thinking. And these are, of course, unfortunately, still examples. I mean, the scaling up of them hasn't really happened. And we're still struggling, even in our office, to make this happen in different parts of the world. There's a difference between working in China, in the States, in Europe. So, I mean, there isn't really a coherent, but how do we ensure this approach internally, at least, is exactly through a very, very strong culture that is based on the initial thinking that we created the office upon. And that's why also we had landscapes, architecture and architecture from the very beginning as completely integrated professions. Mm-hmm. So you don't end up with some trees being planted after the construction budget has been used up, right? So what we're trying to do is to integrate the different professions, have a knowledge base with more than close to 50 nationalities, different educations, bringing these notions of thinking together and making sure that you can follow the path that you laid out many, many years ago and be super stable in the thinking. Not necessarily super stable in the actual result, but super stable in the thinking. What are the emotional qualities that you actually need in order for us to convince clients and others that we should actually continue developing ecologically and sustainably sound projects? Now, there's no question that when we started, we were more on the social sustainability side, you know, with oblique architecture as a driver, where the human body and accessibility and desegregation was really what we wanted for the cities. And then the architecture became a tool for us to allow accessibility and desegregate, like the roof of the Opera House, which, you know, is a cappuccino-free zone, and you can move there without paying, or you don't have to buy nothing. So in a way, it's free, it's accessible, the thresholds are easy to overcome, and it is a possible education for the next generation of opera users. So in a way, accessibility, desegregation, maintaining social ambitions for our urban environments over a long period of time is part of securing also the future. When we gather everyone going up to the Snøhetta mountain every second year with like 300 people, you know, we always going for a hike is super important when it comes to thinking. So you have 300 people climbing this mountain. It takes about 7 hours back and forth. It's quite a long hike, but under the motto, understanding how you actually walk, right? So when you walk in steep terrain, you have to look down, not to stumble. You have to look forwards to know where you're going. You have to look up to dream, and you have to sometimes look back and look at where you came from. And this is the same in architecture. This is the same anywhere you move. You have to maintain flexible, you have to maintain agile in the sense of moving your head, looking at the things in front of you, behind you, above you. And you have to locate your body in this world to understand and to really value the things that architecture can do. So yes, securing this approach is about building internal culture.
Thank you. That was very inspiring. A lesson for all of us. Thank you. Okay, I would like to go back to Gustavo and the Brazilian context, since Brazil is facing a unique environmental challenges from deforestation to rapid urbanization. And my question would be, what role do you see architecture playing in addressing these specific issues, and how does your studio contribute to a more regenerative design practices in this context?
Thank you, Daniela. Well, I will start from what Kjetil said, and I was kind of imagining these 300 people hiking up to the mountain, and I was thinking about that, and kind of thinking to other kind of experience that I had. But if you're walking 300 people and by any chance something happened and they need to buy and they need to build a hunt, right? So they have stones over there. They build something because they need to spend the night, right? So the idea of nature and architecture is much more kind of intertwined, right? It's kind of this differentiation that we have nowadays between that we kind of almost artificialize everything that we live. I think it's a nocive one, right? The idea of culture and nature are two different entities that are kind of colliding with each other. I think it's completely nocive, right? And so what we are trying to think, and probably we think more than we build, which could be a good thing too in terms of sustainability. But the way we are trying to approach and try to add something into this challenge that we have nowadays is kind of, it started our process by thinking that in a really specific way, we are building nature too, right? And because it's the same material that we are kind of combining in a different way, and if we go to a more kind of conceptual way of thinking the world, we live in the Anthropocene moment, right? Where we understood that we don't have any part of the globe that wasn't changed by human condition, right? So we already changed everything, and it keeps as a nature, right? So and if you go to Amazon, the diversity that we have in Amazon nowadays is because, but for so many thousand years, people were starting to change the conditions, bring trees from another part to create life over there. So I think the idea of nature and culture are much more intertwined. And I think this is a difficult task, but to start thinking architecture from this approach that we are in some way building nature, and how to conceptualize nature is something that could change from side to side, right? And I think this idea of not a whole truth of the world, but kind of small elements or small thinking. I think this actually can change, right? Can change a specific side, and I think what Kjetil was saying, that kind of in a small element, then it starts to reverberate, and we hope to kind of expand because we are always optimists as architects. But so yeah, a little bit like that, Daniela.
Thank you so much. Now, my question to Gustavo was more focused on the Brazilian context, but looking abroad, Kjetil, you have experience with projects in very different environments. How do you navigate the balance between bold, experimental sustainability solutions and the importance of maintaining the context-sensitive approach in architecture?
Again, I'd like to emphasize, though, Gustavo, this very important understanding that we're separating things too much, right? Nature from architecture, the left side of the brain with the right side of the brain, you know, where are we? Why are we doing this? I mean, we've learned through psychology that every part of the body is important. Why would we do that when we are designing our surroundings? And why would we do that when we think in this way? So that brings me to the bold. You know, there is no contradiction between being bold and sustainable. There is absolutely nothing there which sort of one works against the other. In fact, it's maybe the opposite, that one is strengthening the sustainable thinking by being bold, by moving forward, by interpreting things in your immediate surroundings where people who've lived there for ages haven't really seen. So sometimes it really is great to come from the outside and sort of look beyond the local blindness, let's put it that way. And this particular context situation is then looking for the odd ones, the sort of nerdy bits of things that might inform your project and turn it into something new, something different from what you've seen before, by using, for instance, local materials. And again, being context sensitive does not mean that you cannot develop concepts at the same time. It doesn't mean that we can't think like a conceptual art in the 70s and still be contextual. So for me, actually, these two things are strengthening each other in the way we look into the future and how things are going to evolve. However, there is one element here, and that's the bottom-up processes that we're looking for. That, the glitch between how you involve, let's say, a local community, who you ask, and how you make the conservatism that is embedded sometimes in a local perception of themselves move beyond that borderline of thinking new. So actually, you have to build a very thorough and very sometimes really slow process of participation for people to understand. You have to show it in large scale. Maybe you have to build mock-ups one-to-one. Maybe you have to move in and locate things in that environment and test them out, like your bricks, Gustavo. And to some extent, these things come together at a certain point where you will say, oh my God, I've never seen this before. At the same time, you say, oh my God, this has always been here. Right? So this breaking point between new and the understanding that it looks like it's always been here is, in my mind, where we're all trying to go. It's sort of completely captured into the soul of a place, but the soul is, of course, a human interpretation of the place. So there are always things to look for. The funniest little flower, or the strangest animal, or the most stupid local inhabitant, and they all bring something to the table. So all these things come together. And I mean, by doing that thoroughly, you're really not working against boldness or experimental form or even sustainability, but you're actually driving the context further through concepts that you line out with the people, with the region, with the place, and all of a sudden you might have a new result coming out of very unexpected reading of that context.
Very interesting. Thank you. Now, my next question is for both of you, but maybe we can start with Gustavo. So, in your case, as someone engaged in both practice and academia, where do you see sustainable architecture heading in the next decade? Are there emerging trends or technologies that you think will shape the future?
Thank you, Daniela. So I think I will engage with Kjetil, what was saying in a kind of beautiful way. And I do love the North American writer Paul Auster, and he always say that when he's starting to write in the beginning of his career, he was always looking outside in terms of what is beautiful, what is the beauty of the writing, right? And after a period, he's starting to actually understand that the beauty of the thing and it's an intrinsic beauty, right? So I think the project has its intrinsic beauty and intrinsic notion of sustainability. I think if we're starting to talk about trends, it could be too dangerous, like, because you can start to apply something that was marvelous and it works so well in a different context, but if you bring to it will not work the same way. And I think exactly what Kjetil was saying, kind of this internal conflict of each project, from that it could arise to a different element. And of course, you're never starting from scratch. You always have like different things, different ideas that you're collecting. But I think the way you put everything together should be unique. So for me, I always have this caution or pay a lot of attention to this idea of trend, or this idea of something that could solve the future, right? I don't think we have one thing. I think we have millions of different things that could work well together. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree completely with you, Gustavo, and I think by oversimplifying this into a populist way of thinking about how to deal with things in the future, we're going to fail. So we have to get to a different level. We have to embrace complexity almost. We have to understand that what is ahead of us doesn't have a simple solution. But when that's said, you know, there are things also in technology and not necessarily trends, but conscious sort of treatment of whatever our surroundings might have to offer in the future. I mean, we have AI, and there's no question that the influence on how to think and how to prompt correctly and how to move into the AI is gathering, let's say, speedy information that you maybe wouldn't have before in a different way. I don't want AI to design for me or for us, but I'd like it to give me information that is credible, and then I'd like to do with that information what I like. So not use it word by word, but use it as a way of engaging with the possible future. But, you know, there are a lot of things that have already been invented. So if you look at the building industry as a whole, it's a shitty industry. You know, it has all these kind of ways of organizing its commercial aspects. Everything is the same. The profiles are the same. I mean, everything, wherever you go, it's more or less the same. And it's a tragedy that we've built a worldwide industry that doesn't really care. So one thing, you know, is what I see when it comes to sustainable architecture in the future, and something else is what I would have liked to see. And I can't say I'm seeing what I'd like to see. It's too slow, it's too unfocused, not even utilizing the inventions that we have today in order to create simple solutions, straightforward solutions. I mean, how big of a problem is it to naturally ventilate a building? It's not difficult. Yes, it entails a certain level of different types of complexities, but you know, when you have a lobby out there wanting to sell you the pipes, and the regulations in the country you're operating don't allow you to have a little bit less of air exchange in the room, or if you have to measure the carbon all the time and then you have to open up, and you know, how do you measure that with windows unless you have a really well-developed sensor strategy in order to fulfill the requirements from the law? So in my mind, we have to change the building regulations. We have to adapt them to a really sustainable future. They shouldn't be maximum requirements. They should be minimum requirements. And as such, we do know that research is about 5 years before legislation. So the influence and the distance between the research that is happening worldwide and the implementation into legal settings worldwide doesn't have a match. So we're continuously living in a delay of knowledge that we could easily implement already with existing systems that we have. How difficult is it to take the heat out of a freezer and use a heat pump in order to regain it? How difficult can it be? I mean, low-hanging fruit, simple to do, and all of a sudden, 50% of the buildings could have lowered their CO2 footprint without no time. But people just don't do it because there are many other considerations. And it is complex. So that's why you need to prioritize in the sequence of things that you're doing. And for me, the future lies within not the trends per se, but the conscious reaction and the priorities of things that we have to do. And then, of course, utilizing technologies in the advantage of the human being and not the other way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, both of you, for that contribution. And so far, we have been talking about each one of your practices, but I would like to move on the conversation, talking more specifically about the Holcim Foundation Awards and your role on it. Gustavo, in your case, in reviewing submissions from Latin America, what unconventional strategies or overlooked aspects should receive more recognition in today's sustainability evaluations?
So I think what is interesting to be in a jury as a Holcim Award is kind of, I can debate, for example, this debating that we have now, we probably will have before the jury, right? So kind of try to establish kind of where to navigate, right? So I think this kind of, in a way, I think that the result of, it's always a result from the jury, which is kind of implement or establish a more common thought, right? But for me, I think always what is interesting about being a jury is actually that I can learn with so many different projects, right? And let's put it this way, what I aim to learn is how can we actually expand what we do in terms of good practice, which is not just by the building per se, but how can we actually have more relevance in society, right? What Kjetil was saying is that the problem of legislation that no one who actually designed properly is in the board to do the legislation, right? So kind of we lose our relevance in society, but so many different ways. And I think like by looking to these projects, what would be, at least for me, super interesting to take a look into it, and it is how we can actually permeate more society, not just by designing the building, but kind of delivering something else, right? And yeah.
Thank you. And Kjetil, in your case, you are a jury chair. How do you balance the pressure to prioritize cutting-edge sustainability solutions while ensuring that regional traditional approaches are not overshadowed? How do you make sure the 2025 winners reflect meaningful long-term sustainability aligned with the Holcim Foundation principles?
I think the Holcim Foundation's principles are very, very similar to Snøhetta own. And the evaluation of a lot of the things that we're doing on a social, environmental, and economic holistic perspective is in itself a possibility of looking at many different aspects of the things that actually come together in a very innovative or cutting edge manner. And when you talk about regional and traditional approaches maybe being overshadowed, I would say these are maybe more cutting edge than some of the other cutting edges we have today, you know? It is, in fact, cutting edge is a relative thing. It is where you move yourself forward by utilizing the lowest means of engagement in order to receive the highest possible result or the best possible result. So cutting edge to me is how you use whatever is local, whatever you have available, rather than, and like I said, in many situations today, that is actually more cutting edge than so-called cutting edge. And in a way, that belongs back to the holistic perspective. I feel really comfortable in a European context to be able to find the qualities that is embedded within this holistic approach. As Gustavo says, learning about what's happening out there, which was the same when I was in the Obel Foundation, because, you know, it's really a fantastic way of learning about what colleagues are doing around the world. It's like a learning session. But at the same time, of course, securing the best possible result for the Holcim Foundation Awards. And that to me is a debate in the jury where you're trying to look for what the different jury members bring to the table, how we discuss the issues at hand, how we compare the projects, how we prioritize what this project wants to achieve, what that project wants to achieve, and then measure it against its ambition. Right? So it's not taken out of the air, whatever is happening when you do a project, So you also have to measure it up against its own ambition of where to go. If it's a lot of blah, blah, it'll probably move out quite quickly. If it is substantial and relevant, as Gustavo says, then maybe it stays in longer. And I'm not sure, but I just have the most beautiful evening sun coming in here. It's just crazy. I mean, being in Norway in the winter is so fantastic because you have such long blue hours. So the sun
Soft
just
light.
keeps hanging on the horizon forever. It's like fantastic. Sorry, interruption.
No, thank you. Thank you, both of you, for this amazing conversation, for these valuable perspectives. I could stay here the rest of the day, to be honest. It's so inspiring. But now I would like to invite our audience to join the conversation. So if someone in the audience would like to put some questions for Gustavo or Kjetil, please type in the chat, and we will go through them. I already have picked a couple here. So the first question is for Gustavo. So your studio has developed projects across different scales and typologies. How does the firm navigate the transition between smaller scale works and more complex urban projects while maintaining principles of sustainability and sensitivity to context?
It's a good question. I don't know exactly precisely in terms of method, right? It's kind of, but I think like in the end, the scale of the project, it's more kind of relevant in terms of the complexity of that you need to navigate. And so it's a kind of more urban project. You need to oversee some legislation and different situations, right? When we go to kind of an art installation and this is much more freer, right? But I think in the end, it's what we want to say, right? What we want to add, and how can we be part of it, right? Of what the project wants in a way, right? So I think all the projects in the studio, they are own research per itself, right? So when you're starting to do something, it's if it is actually a research, how you're gonna end, it's not the important thing. It's actually the journey of it, right? So I think we even if it's big project, small project, I think we tend to kind of navigate in this idea of how we touch the ground, how we use material, how can we engage with community, how can we actually build more with less, how can we actually have an approach to architecture in a way that we kind of reuse the same elements, but maybe try to use the same elements in a different way, right? Not by the newness of it, but more kind of how can we add to the architectural knowledge per se. So I think this different project, independent of the scale, we try to navigate through this path. But I think in the end, parts of the project, it start from kind of us looking the model and saying this is a good proportion, this is not a good proportion, it's fitting here, it's not fitting here. So and I think it's this kind of, for me it's really, I'm trying for so long, but for me it's really difficult to actually create a method into it, because sometimes you just look into it, it feels that it is right. And I don't want to be kind of spiritual here, but I don't know, like Kjetil said, like, look, this beautiful light, it's coming here and it's moving him to that, right? And I think by the process, when you're doing something kind of hits you, you don't kind of overthink it too much, you just kind of feel that should be the way of go, and so yeah.
It's a bit the instinct and the the sensitivity of each person, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no.
Thank you. And for Kjetil, I have a couple of questions here.
Daniela,
Sorry?
can I do the same question to Kjetil? Just to
Of
actually,
course.
I would love to.
This is an open
actually hear,
conversation.
because he actually navigates in so many different scales, so many different contexts. So I would be wonderful to hear from you, Kjetil.
I think you're touching upon something, you know, the most beautiful thing is when you've started designing a project and you go home at night and the next morning the project has finished itself. You know, there's something beautiful about intuition and reacting intuitively on certain things, because it's not only a gut feeling that brings you towards, it's using all your senses. And our last book was called Collective Intuition, which seems like a contradiction, but it's not. And trying to portray this sort of, you know, architecture is sensitizing the public by effect. So in order to be present in your own project, you have to sensitize yourself by everything that you've gathered, experience, beautiful situations, conversations, films, literature, music, and all of that inspires you somehow to move forward in how to build up your own intuition. Intuition doesn't come out of thin air. Intuition, you're not born with the same intuition you have when you're 50. So these things come together as a way of sensitizing yourself as you move forward. And scale is the same. It doesn't really matter if you draw a fork or an opera house, because you have to be almost as close to everything you're dealing with in any case. So the fork doesn't have that many problems. It has some fingers, you know, so you can actually eat with it, and it has a balance on the finger, so it needs to fit right in the hand. But the opera needs to be good for the performers and the public. And you know that it's all, the scaling issue is in many ways, I think, blown out of proportions when it comes to sensitivity. And I do like the word of sensitivity and intuition, because that actually is the core issue here. I mean, you know, even though we're architects and designers, we also react like normal people. We can see things that we like and dislike. And it's just the way it is. So don't discredit yourself for being an architect, having opinions on things that you like and dislike. You're just as entitled as anyone else to like something big, like something small. You know, diversity is beautiful.
Thank you for this. Now, I have here a question that for me is very interesting. It's from Annie from the Holcim Foundation, and it's for you, Kjetil. What is the most critical gap in how architects are approaching sustainability today?
The most critical gap is knowledge.
Knowledge. Okay.
Yes. I think we would have to say that we usually portray it as a gap between demands of clients, legal parameters, and let's say the building industry. Yes, it is terrible. But the biggest deficit is within the architectural profession itself. And I think we have to realize this. We have to go in and be self-critical about where we are, what we talk about, when we talk about it, and how we argue for it. So in my mind, architects have had a tendency of leaning too far backwards and saying, oh, I had a bad client, or, you know, I didn't know, or the building industry couldn't build it, or, you know, I think it's the knowledge base within the communities that actually does create our surroundings where we have the biggest deficit and the biggest gap. But I know it's harsh. It sounds really harsh, and maybe maybe oversimplified in a sense, because we do know there are many that actually do care a lot and actually do work hard on it. But then again, you know, probably too many don't still. We would like to get everyone on board thinking in the same direction and taking on the same responsibilities that we believe we have. And maybe then, step by step, things could actually really change. We're far away from getting close to our climate goals. You know, it's getting postponed year by year. I don't know. Maybe we'll end up with the +5 degrees centigrade. I don't know. The CO2 issue is immense because it influences everything else we're dealing with, the forests of this world, you know, the tundra of this world. When it starts, you don't want to know what happens when it starts melting down and releases the CO2 into the air up in Russia or northern parts of Norway, or, you know, massive CO2. And I don't see we're dealing with that. Not the road engineers, not the architects, not the building engineers, not the clients, to the extent that I would like to see. But it is moving forward, that said, right? So it's not hopeless in any way, but I just feel everyone needs to take a bit of responsibility and step it up just a little bit. And I think like the Holcim Foundation is helping to do that. It's one of these important organizations that actually has a very clear focus on it. And in my mind, as many architects who believe they have something to deliver to this debate and the discussion in Holcim juries, they should deliver. Because, you know, it's not about being perfect, but it's about showing intention. Where do we want to go? What can I learn? You know, what have I done? And objects in a large scale, in an urban scale, or in a small scale, like an object, won't solve everything. And we have some few politicians worldwide that are actually pushing in the right direction. So the next time we measure the electricity mix coming out of the plug here in Norway, if you count in hydroelectric power, maybe we're close to 80%, which means, you know, I would love to get rid of the photovoltaic cells. I would love to get rid of them because, you know, they're misusing all the material that we should use for something else. So in a way, and you need to be at almost 600 kilowatt hours per year in order to pay back the CO2 footprint of a photovoltaic cell. I mean, it's crazy, you know. So all of a sudden we have industry, we have the understanding of the future and how we're moving, and the lack is on many levels. The one thing that is looking promising is research. I think research is pushing quite heavily and are upfront, but then it takes so long for it to be included in legislations and laws. So yeah, I'm not sure if it was an answer, but I was trying.
No, it was for sure. Thank you so much. Now, to wrap up the conversation today, I would like to ask both of you. It's a question from, actually it's two questions from two students, but I will try to combine them. So as a student aspiring to become an architect, I deeply admire both of your approach to design and sustainability. What advice would you give to young architects who want to create impactful and environmentally responsible projects in today's rapidly changing world? And what would you say to architecture students before starting their career? How sustainability can take place in our reflection? Something you wished someone told you before. So I would like to put this broader question to both of you. If someone would like to start.
I can start and then you can finish off maybe yourself.
Thank you.
It's always hard to give advice to young students, I find, you know, because when I was teaching in Innsbruck as a professor there, I always felt I was learning more from the students than they were learning from me. And in a funny way, it's this whole notion of saying, okay, use your experience. What would you have done differently? What advice can you give me? I mean, the best possible advice is, you know, really go for it and never take no for a no. Because in the end, we know that architecture in many ways is an ideological choice. There are possibilities for changing certain situations in the future if you engage hard enough. But I don't think you can be passive as an architect. I think you have to be active, and I think you have to promote your point of view, and you have to try to incorporate that through hard work, and I'm saying hard work, into your designs.
I'll take that as advice for you. But yeah, I totally agree with that. And if I can add something to it, I think it's go outside, be yourself. You are a unique person here. Don't try to be any other person rather than you. And be as critical as you can with yourself, with your design, right? I think we are talking about sustainability here, right? And everything that all acts that you have when you are alive, it impacts something, right? And the act of building something, it will impact enormously, right? So as much as you can be critical with yourself and try to push your design forward in a more kind of the way that you believe it should be pushed forward, do that without as much as you can, because after you put something else, it will be built, it will be for, I don't know, at least 100 years there. So I think it's so much responsibility by building something. So be critical. I think it's important.
Maybe I can just add one thing to that, Gustavo. I think it's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
fun, you know, because
fun.
what are you doing as a student? You're searching within yourself, exactly
Yeah.
for, and in order to be able to do that, we did some experimentation with our students in Innsbruck, saying, you know, why are your habits the way they are? Can you challenge them? So, for instance, if you were a student liking to get up late in the morning, get up early. If you like to get up early, get up late. If you like football, go to a concert, a classical concert. If you like only classical music, go to a football game. Or, you know, try to understand why the habits that you have and the likes and the dislikes that you have in life are part of you, and trying to investigate where your sympathies lie and the reason why they're there. And that actually turned out to be a very, very successful way of letting some students, at least, lowering the shoulders when it came to putting ink on a piece of paper. Because the fear that you have, and many of the young generation have this fear, that anything they do right now is disturbing the environment. Yes, to some extent they're right. On the other hand, that is an unjust way of looking at the future. Because so many people don't even have a school.
Yeah.
So in a way, this is not enough to come from a very privileged part of the world and look at it as if we've done everything. No, we haven't. So we have to still contribute in education to architectural students, design students, landscape architecture students who are willing to take a step forward in order to change it into something better.
If I can add one more thing that just came to mind now, but I was listening to Alan Watts, and I think we were talking here during our conversation, this relationship between kind of this dichotomy, right, or this contradiction between nature and culture, whatever, kind of left and right side. And I think like and work and play, sometimes they're not coming together. And I think in our profession and with so many other professions, I think it's so much commitment, and I think it should be joyful, right? I think when you do something with love, with kind of joy, the result is totally different, right? If you eat something that with someone cook with joy and love, it's so different that you eat from a kind of fast food, right? So not just about kind of what you're eating, but like how you practice, how you do that. And I think this actually could change yourself and then change maybe others, but change yourself for sure.
Bang.
Thank you. This was the perfect way to wrap up this conversation, in my opinion. So we have many more questions on the chat, but unfortunately we don't have more time to go through them. I would like to thank really both of you for this conversation. It was a huge lesson for me as well, and I hope that our audience enjoyed the conversation and had some lessons learned from this.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Kjetil. I hope I can meet you personally one day. Kjetil, would love to be around you.
All I have to do is to fly to Brazil.
Oh, I can afford to fly too. Or we can meet
Easy.
in between.
Yeah, we could meet in between. We could meet in between. I have to be on planes that are only full these days. Otherwise, my personal CO2 footprint goes sky high. So I have to look at, is the plane full or isn't it full, you know, before I fly.
Well, thank you both, Kjetil and Gustavo. It was so inspiring, everything that you said. And thank you, Daniela, for this excellent moderation. It was so great having you here.